honorable panelists. We've got a very distinguished set of panelists here. Khalil Sattar Saab, of course, we know him very well. He's a long-time member of the Pakistan Business Council, but we're also joined by Nazeer Kalhoro Saab from Sindh and Dr. Naeem from Punjab. I think they're very important, let's say, the policy shapers. And foremost, I would also like to welcome Faisal Hussain, whose progress or the progress of his company we've been following very keenly, particularly after the listing. And I think we've been in touch with him on a number of occasions. We need to learn from you and of course from Khalil Sattar Saab also on the dynamics of this particular industry. So without going into any of the details of what was covered in the study, I just want to reiterate that what is Pakistan Business Council all about and how is it relevant, and how is the study of meat relevant even to the Pakistan Business Council? Because as you probably know, the Pakistan Business Council is dominated by people who are directly involved in manufacturing. So we're very fortunate to have now 88 members. Most of them belong to about 14 or 15 sectors of manufacturing. But we have, now coming to the relevance part of it, we adopted about 4 or 5 years ago an overarching theme under which we work, which we call Make in Pakistan. The reason why Make in Pakistan is relevant to Pakistan is because it generates jobs. If you manufacture or you produce something in Pakistan, if you also add some value and export it, then of course it helps our external account, and goes without saying that if you support the domestic industry to become less import reliant, then that also goes towards supporting import substitution. So those are the 3 pillars on which we've been working. Now, Make in Pakistan can be misinterpreted to mean manufacture. It actually does not only mean manufacture, it means growing more, producing more. So growing more obviously is in the agriculture domain, and livestock is very much part of that. And of course, producing more comes into the services domain. So all of that, of course, generates jobs, generates exports, and of course, to some extent, also creates import substitution. So it all comes back really into our overarching theme, which is Make in Pakistan. So that said, I think I'd like to hand back over to you, Saud, and if you can then lead us into the next stage, and then we can come back and sum up towards the latter part of the meeting.
Thank you, Ehsan. I'm grateful. I'd like to introduce Ms. Hareem Amna and Mr. Jawad Rahman, my colleagues here in Islamabad, who have worked on this report. So without further ado, Hareem, over to you for the presentation. Thank you.
Saud, can you please enable screen sharing?
Sure, I'll do that. You should be able to share your screen now, Hareem. Go ahead.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope I'm audible and the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is, Hareem. If you can also run the slide mode.
Okay, let's start with the presentation. So as Mr. Ehsan Malik mentioned about the Make in Pakistan agenda of BBC. So as per this Make in Pakistan Trust, we have, BBC have published this report on scaling up of bovine meat export in Pakistan. And I'll be running through the presentation, which majorly contains the main findings of our report. So starting off with the Pakistan's bovine meat export I would like to firstly mention that Pakistan export two different categories of meat: chilled meat and frozen meat. And for the sake of clarity, I would like to mention, just to avoid any confusion, that the term chilled meat and fresh meat would be used interchangeably throughout the presentation. So, what is basically the difference between chilled and frozen meat? Chilled meat is it's a premium product which has a low shelf life around of 21 days, and it can be transported via air routes. Whereas frozen is a relatively cheaper product, and it has greater shelf life, and it can be exported via sea. So Pakistan exports around to $30 million worth of chilled and bovine meat. And as you can see in the graph, the proportion of chilled meat is greater, which is 91.6%. Now let's move on to find out where this 230 million of exports go to. So Pakistan's exports, as you can see in this figure, is limited to the GCC region, Afghanistan and Vietnam only. This total consists of 8 countries. And why is that? Because of the very prevalent foot and mouth disease issue that is prevalent across the country and and which basically restricts Pakistan entry into the largest importers of beef, which are China, USA, and some European countries. So due to the prevalence of FMD, Pakistan's exports are generally confined to the GCC region, which are amounts to 87% of the exports. Now, if we dig a little deeper into the GCC market, we find out that out of the total chilled carcasses imported by GCC, Pakistan's exports amount to 56%. So here we can make 2 conclusions. First, Pakistan exports mainly to the GCC region, and it exports majorly chilled carcasses. Now, after having a look at the Pakistan's export scenario, let's move on to look at the global market and see what is actually demanded in the global market. So in the figure, you can very clearly see that the trade of frozen bovine meat have actually surpassed the trade in chilled meat, which means that demand for frozen meat is greater now. And within the 3 categories of carcasses, bone-in cuts and boneless cuts, the boneless cuts are the most demanded globally, both in chilled and in frozen meat category. So now let's narrow down our discussion to frozen market and look at the top exporters of frozen beef. Brazil is the top exporter, and whereas India also joins the list as the 4th top exporter of beef. And how did India get here? Basically, India actually capitalized on the largest buffalo herd that is there. 55% of the total buffaloes in the world are located in India, and India identified the opportunity of a large global market for frozen beef, and is now exporting 90% of the total beef in the form in frozen form. There is one very important point here to mention. Among these top 4 exporters of frozen beef, Brazil, USA, and India, they export halal meat to the Muslim countries. So having said this, Brazil, USA, and India, they are non-Muslim countries, yet they successfully slaughter animal in a halal way. They have received halal certification and are actually exporting beef to the Muslim countries in the Middle East, in the Southeast Asia and Northern Africa very successfully. And therefore, Pakistan do not have a competitive edge in exporting halal meat. So if we look in detail on the top export markets of the top exporters, we'll find out that the top export market for Brazil and Australia is China, which actually imports around $8 billion worth of frozen beef. Now we'll move on to discussing what actually made Brazil the top exporter, and later why China is the top importer. Starting off with Brazil. So around in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Brazilian government came up with a set of interventions which actually helped Brazil increase the domestic production of beef and exports. So government came up with certain financing schemes in which government financed holding equipment, storage spaces, and even the construction of silos for animal feed. The government did some macroeconomic readjustments to provide a favorable exchange rate. They came up with a proper FMD control program, which was implemented throughout the country. It actually enabled Brazil reach the stage 4 of the PCP. Then the government also executed successfully cross-breeding programs. They collaborated with the Processors and Exporters Association, and finally invested in the top leading meat processing companies and established national champions so that they can compete in the international market. So what made China the biggest bovine meat importer? It was mainly the rising incomes, which have actually contributed to increased consumption. And here in the graph, you can see that the Chinese imports basically, they literally skyrocketed after 2017, which was due to the outbreak of the African swine flu, which that around in 2018, which actually shifted the demand from pork to beef. Also, cattle farming is still in its very early stages. So China actually had to import, and resultantly, China gave market access to 16 additional countries in just a duration of 5 years. And those countries include Thailand, Russia, Mexico, Finland, among others. So after now that we have had a look on the global market and the Pakistani market, PBC have actually identified several areas of opportunity that are there for Pakistan. Pakistan, firstly, can diversify into frozen meat category and boneless meat category, as we have seen that these two categories of meat are greatly demanded by the global market. Pakistan can access Chinese market since China is a neighboring country, and we have seen that top exporters have actually exploited this opportunity, and they have actually made it to the top of the list. Pakistan can utilize sea routes, which are relatively cheaper than the air routes, which are mostly used presently in Pakistan. But in order to tap these current opportunities, Pakistan first needs to address challenges that hinder the growth of domestic production of meat, which are like Pakistan have a very limited stock that is specifically reared for beef, and high yielding cattle is mostly reared for dairy. Again, the emphasis needs to be on beef varieties. And since like livestock sector is mostly dominated by like smallholder farmers, which are who are like fragmented across the region, so the sector is very informal and undocumented, which makes animal traceability very difficult. So coming to the challenges that actually affect export of bovine meat, the first and the foremost challenge is the prevalence of FMD. I've mentioned it before, I'll repeat it again, that due to the presence of FMD, Pakistan's geographic focus and Pakistan's export market is limited to only 8 countries. Pakistan is not currently able to export to the major importers of beef because there is a very serious issue of foot and mouth disease in Pakistan. And moreover, due to the lack of capacity of deboning and freezing, Pakistan's export focus is only limited to chilled carcasses. And since Pakistan export through air, which is relatively expensive, so it negatively affects price competitiveness of our beef in the international market. So, okay, one of the major solution that we have identified, which will actually address an animal traceability and somewhat open up international markets, is the development of backgrounding and feedlot fattening farms, which will actually ensure animal traceability. It will reduce the number of animals that are culled prior to their prime age, and it will improve the quality of beef that is being exported. Now, so after deeply analyzing the Pakistan's export market, the global market, the challenges and opportunities that are there, PBC proposes to develop a cohesive policy framework to increase the production and export of bovine meat in Pakistan. And the most important policy recommendation that we make is that we need to establish disease-free zones in the country so that Pakistan can actually transition to stage 3 of the progressive control pathway for FMD. And this establishment of disease-free zones and Pakistan's transition to stage 3 will actually open up several international markets which are currently closed for Pakistan. The government can lease land to the private sector in those disease-free zones and for the development of feedlot farms, and also provide subsidized credit for the establishment of farms. The government needs to remove the price controls and meatless days to encourage the investment in the sector, promote rearing cost-efficient animals, import high-yielding varieties of animals specifically for beef, regulate silage prices, and promote sale of animals by weight rather than physical appearances to incentivize animal fattening, and also encourage JVs with international companies. So these policy recommendations, when put together, are actually expected to help Pakistan increase production and export of bovine meat. By this, I will close the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. And back to you, Saud.
Thank you so much, Naeem, for the presentation. I think we can stop sharing the screen at the moment. And so with that, now that we've concluded with the presentation, which really summarized the research which PBC has done on the sector, and I'm grateful to all the contributors to the research. I would like to open up the floor to the panelists. I would like to invite Dr. Kanwar, Dr. Naeem Kanwar from the Livestock and Dairy Development Board, Punjab. He is the Director General for Production, to jump in and give his remarks on the topic. Over to you, Dr. Saab.
Thank you very much, Saud. First of all, I am thankful for giving this opportunity to participate in such sort of the presentations. And more importantly, the policy recommendations, these are quite comprehensive. और इसमें मैं कुछ आपको इसमें थोड़ा सा addition करना चाहूँगा कि what the Punjab government is doing on these recommendations. सबसे important है प्रोडक्शंस को इंक्रीज करना. जितनी प्रोडक्शन होगी क्वालिटेटिव, उतनी ही एक्सपोर्ट सरप्लस प्रोड्यूस होगा, और वही जो है अपॉर्चुनिटीज क्रिएट करेगी प्रोड्यूसर्स के लिए और एक्सपोर्टर्स के लिए रेवेन्यू जनरेशन का. तो प्रोडक्शंस के लिए फीडलॉट फैटनिंग का और सेफ्टी का पंजाब आखिरी 7-8 साल से इसमें लीड कर रहा है कंट्री में. और पंजाब की बेसिस पर ही अभी जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर इनिशिएटिव्स में 7 लाख जो जानवर फीडलॉट फैटिंग का मनसूबा है उसका 3rd ईयर भी चल रहा है। थर्डली जो है इसमें मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंटली जो पंजाब गवर्नमेंट इसमें जो कर रही है वो डिजीज़ फ्री जोन के लिए जो है वो FAO की जो वैक्सीन इंपोर्ट करके उसका 8th जो है वो शॉट जो है वो बहावलपुर डिवीज़न में चोलिस्तान एरिया में कंटिन्यू है। और इसको इम्पॉर्टेंट था इसकी ट्रेसेबिलिटी और मूवमेंट्स के लिए जो है इसकी लेजिस्लेशन दैट्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। उसके लिए एनिमल हेल्थ एक्ट जो है अभी 2019 में जो है पंजाब कैबिनेट से अप्रूव्ड है। उसके रूल्स जो है वो फ्रेमवर्क का प्रोसेस है। तो ये जो बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट है WTO की और EOI की वो भी हम इसमें कंप्लायंस में इसमें पंजाब जो है वो इंशाल्लाह फ्रंट पे है तमाम प्रोविंस के साथ नेशनल कोऑर्डिनेशन के साथ। तो इंशाल्लाह इसमें भी वी आर होपफुल कि हम इसको जो है ये डिजीज़ फ्री जो इसका स्टेटस है वी आर वर्किंग ऑन दैट एंड मेकिंग अटमोस्ट एफर्ट। इसमें जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट है वो है प्रोडक्शन कॉस्ट। अगर हम एक्सपोर्ट्स के देखें TTAP की रिपोर्ट के मुताबिक जो $3 हैं इंडियन बीफ की जो एक्सपोर्ट कर रहा है जो हमारे टारगेट कंट्रीज जिस वक्त हम एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, जबकि पाकिस्तान जो है वो अराउंड अबाउट $4 कर रहा है। तो $1 का इसमें डिफरेंस है। तो इसके लिए प्रोडक्शन कॉस्ट को रिड्यूस करने के लिए यही है कि फार्मर्स को इंसेंटिवाइज किया जाए जैसा कि फीडर फैटिंग में कर रहे हैं। और मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली जो है इसमें रिसर्च की जाए फीडिंग टेक्निक्स पे, फीडिंग इंग्रेडिएंट्स पे, ताकि जो है लेसर कॉस्ट और मोर इफेक्टिव जो है वो फीड प्रोड्यूस हो। क्योंकि फीड लॉट फैटिंग का 70% जो बिजनेस है जो फीडिंग एक्सपेंडिचर्स हैं वो फीड पे चल रहे होते हैं। तो गवर्नमेंट इज क्वाइट इसमें बड़ा फोकस्ड है। फीड लॉट फैटिंग के फार्मर्स को फार्म्स को इंसेंटिवाइज कर रहा है 4000 रुपीज़ पर फार्मर्स। और इसमें राउंड अबाउट हमने जो है आखिरी 2 सालों में 25,000 जो फार्मर्स हैं वो इसमें ट्रेन भी किए हैं। एंड होपफुली वी आर कंटिन्यू इन फ्यूचर। Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Naeem Saab. That really summarizes the initiatives being taken by the Government of Punjab. I'm sure we'll come back to you with questions on the effectiveness and how you're planning on taking these forward. Thank you so much for your intervention. Can I invite Mr. Nazeer Kalhoro, the Director General of Livestock and Fisheries Department, Sindh. So would you please care to come in and make your comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The presentation was indeed very comprehensive. I must congratulate Ms. Naeem for bringing these, very summarized and focused approach. How can we move forward? In addition to this, I would like to comment on some important moves which has been taken by the Sindh government that the business community can be somehow, get aware of this. Number one that we are doing, that is the zones. We have already declared zone Tharpakar as a disease-free zone. And Tharpakar desert area is very much confined and physically separate one. And that is having, 1.25% of the border is covered by India, and then there's the sea. And then there are only 3 routes which connect the Tharpakar with the rest of Sindh. So therefore, we have declared that zone. And this is the only place where we have a lot of livestock there. In addition to this, we have declared some compartments so that if any person is also interested in this, government designated farms has already been declared as a compartment. But now we have prepared somehow homework, and within a 1 month period time, we are planning to have at least 5,000 compartments farms registered for export purposes. And the department has done, all the homework in order to ensure the business community and as well as the farmers that their product will be exported in future as well. So therefore, we are targeting about 5,000 compartments for export purpose, including these feedlot farming, plots. In addition to this, regarding FMD, we are very much near to the agreement that we have developed a FMD packaging unit, and where we are importing FMD concentrated farm to the Sindh province, that where we can dilute it and bottle it here. That is the major problem with the FMD vaccine, is that's a cost. So therefore the Sindh government is planning to reduce the cost by importing in bulk concentrated form and then dilute it and then bottle it and then So with the same budgetary allocation, we can multiply the dose by 3, and then the poor farmers can access to the funding. And one of the mega initiative of the Sindh government is underway. That is, we are developing FMD vaccine, establishing FMD vaccine plant in one of the island in Karachi. That's Kanwar Island. Island has been identified, and this is a public-private partnership. So we will be looking for various, investors in order to bring that technology and partner with the Sindh government in order to establish that plant. And that plant is underway of the feasibility, and we are expecting something like 7 billion to 10 billion rupees investment in that plant. And there will be the sum of the, risk allocations under the PPP mode. That some of the risk will be covered by the government and some of the private investor will be there. So it will be a very much international, and we are looking for that. We are very serious about this FMD vaccine production until unless it is not progress. It will be interesting for you that Pakistan since 2008 it is importing, has imported more than worth of 10 billion rupees vaccine. And the one plant which is to be established at mainland at that time, that was about 7 billion rupees at the highest level, if you see international market. So therefore, Sindh government is rightly thinking on this, and we have initiated our feasibility study, and we are inviting investors soon. Within 9-month period, the Honorable Chief Minister Sindh has given us a time of 9 months to finish this task, and we will be inviting some businessmen locally and as well as internationally to partners in government. Regarding traceability, this was the second big issue for the export. And we have passed the law, and the Sindh government has passed the law, that is the Sindh Livestock Registration and Trading Authority, where every farmer has to register with the livestock department, and the compartment has to be certified, and then some of the local and international auditors has to visit and everything, feed, including medicine, has to be registered with the provincial authorities in order to see this. And so therefore, we are on gradual development side. Authority has been established, law has been there. And we are also revising law with the GRASP, the European Union project. It's a GRASP in Sindh and Balochistan. Can you please hear? So GRASP is there, and we are revising, especially the laws which are related with the meat, especially on the slaughterhouse. The conditions of the slaughterhouse are not hygienic, and the exporting slaughterhouses are not registered with any government agency, only for the quarantine department for only export purposes. So therefore, we want to regularize these all slaughterhouses as well under the SLATA, Sindh Livestock Registration and Trade Authority, or as well as revising the West Pakistan House Act through certain amendments. Regarding beef breeds, our initiative has been, we have rightly identified, but not at large level, but we have now imported some of the beef breeds, bull, like a Brahman from US, and we are now producing semen. So more of the eight Brahman bulls has been recently imported and producing semen, and that is to be distributed.
I think we momentarily lost Nazeer Saab. I think we can just wait a few seconds. I'm sure he'll be back. Nazeer Saab, can you hear us? Nazeer Saab, you're on mute.
Yes, I can.
Okay, please continue.
No. In addition to this, so regarding beef breeds, we have imported some of the bulls like Brahman, and we are importing semen for most of the famous beefs. So regarding this livestock breeding authority, which has been established in Sindh, has equally given opportunity not only for indigenous but exotic, highly genetic potential yielding animals to be imported, and as well as semen. So the small thing which was with the federal government, that they were not allowing us for import. So we had a series of negotiation with the federal government, and finally they agreed to import for the
All right, I think Mr. Nazeer is having some connectivity problems. Nazeer Saab, are you there?
Know why it's happening, but anyway, so we have imported, bulls which are stationed in Karachi for semen production, and as well as semen doses from abroad for the beef in order to boost the beef production in the country. Save the Calf is also there, and fattening of the calf, we have also initiated a scheme this year. And this was a big issue that the calves which were being brought, the buffaloes and the cattle which were being brought throughout country into Karachi, their calves were slaughtered within a 3 days period. So in order to save the potential of the animals and the population of the animals, we are doing that as well. So out of nine identified initiatives, we are already working on some of the 6 initiatives, and 7 and the 2 or 3 initiatives are on in the pipeline from Sindh government. But the problem with us is that the budgetary allocations for the department are not so much impressive. If you see budgetary allocations, because in the sector, there are the 3 things which are always boost the sector for the development. In the livestock, very unfortunately, the finances from the public side is, very meager. And if they are in the PC meat side. If you see, before the 18th Amendment, the federal government investment in the livestock sector was about 22 billion rupees. And then the provincial, for the Sindh province, it was about 4.2 billion portfolio of the development, and as well as regular side activity of 3 billion. And currently, along with livestock and poultry and fisheries, we have a portfolio of about 1.8 billion rupees. Almost
All right, it looks like Nazeer Saab is offline. Nazeer Saab, are you there? All right, I think we can come back to Nazeer Saab eventually for him to complete his intervention when he's back. And I would like to take the opportunity to request Faisal Hussain Saab, who's the CEO of the Organic Meat Company. Faisal Saab, would you care to jump in and give your views and comments after having taken into account all that you've heard so far, from BBC's presentation to the Government of Punjab's ongoing programs, to Sindh's ongoing programs, from the private sector as an exporter? How are you looking at the space? Where do you see the opportunities? Where do you see the difficulties? Please educate us and enlighten us. Over to you, Faisal Saab. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I actually would wish to have Nazeer Saab back also, so that we can all on the same page while I'm talking about anything. Well, Hareem has very well presented. She has covered nearly all the points. I would just like to add a few things which have been missed out, and those are that, see, as far as, because we're talking about how to increase and what steps are being taken to increase bovine exports from Pakistan, while Pakistan has only less than a 1% share in the world's market. So obviously there's a disease problem in Pakistan, which in this government, Punjab authority and Sindh authorities are working on it extensively, as spoken about all these things. So what I would say, everything starts from being competitive in the international market. So if we see in the past few months, there has been a major surge in animal prices within Pakistan, and we need to find out the reasons for those animal price hikes, and which become actually the reason for Pakistan being uncompetitive and having less share in the frozen market. So what we need to understand is that, first of all, that we need to have serious kind of controls on cross-border animal crossing to Iran and Afghanistan. Recently, 3 months ago, I think one of our courts have issued an order that there shouldn't be any kind of cross-border meat being going to Afghanistan or animals going into Afghanistan through Peshawar border. But we need stricter controls. We need to push those governments from, obviously it has to be done from the government side, that instead of actually acquiring animals which are undocumented and all these meat exports which go cross border as part of Pakistan's helping program for Afghanistan, for feeding Afghanistan, this should be done in a documented way. So there need to be stricter controls on our borders. Because a lot of live animals actually cross border into these two countries, and this has been happening for donkey's years actually. So we need to stop this immediately. Strict actions need to be taken on this, and if those countries obviously require meat or animals, so that has to be done in a proper way, documented way, and meat should be exported to them, and Pakistan's exchequer should be getting official dollars from those meat exports. So this is one thing. The other thing is why we are seeing these severe kind of price hikes within the country of animals. Every year it is understandable because there's natural inflation. So meat used to get expensive by 5-7% every year. But this year it has seen a surge of more than 25%. So now we go back, like Harim explained about these feed cost, and so did Mr. Nazeer Saab and Dr. Naeem Saab very well. So we recently started exporting animal feed from Pakistan, and this resulted in major price hikes in the feed costs. So if a farmer, like now I am a farmer also for the past 3 months, we have put up a fattening farm. Alhamdulillah, we are the biggest fattening farm of Pakistan. We started off with a farm of 3,500 animals. And I'm happy to hear it from Mr. Nazeer Saab that they're making different compartments, and they're issuing different kind of certifications to feed fattening farms and all. The only purpose was to actually get weaker animals, feed them, make them ready for export purposes, make them grow and make them worthwhile in quality, instead of having these animals slaughtered within Pakistan, which are kamzor janwar, like because all these animals come into the mandi, they are bought by different butchers, and they are culled actually. So instead of wasting the potential of animals, we should actually gather those animals, feed them properly, bring them to the level of exports, and then process on them and start exporting. So while these feed exports are going on from Pakistan, I just want to let the government have this attention that while Prime Minister Saab talks about that the growth of our children is not to that capacity. Similarly, when you're going to export different kind of feeds from Pakistan and you want to actually feed the animals of the importing nation instead of your own, then feed prices have gone up massively, resulting in meat costs going up, animal raising costs going up, and it's for everyone. It's not only for us, because see, our as exporters, as manufacturers, we tend to find places where we can actually export our products to, and that is why everyone is focusing on that prime product which is being sent to the GCC. So everyone is exporting. Most of the focus is on the chilled product. So while I just want to correct Harim that a lot of chilled product is now being exported via sea. Whatever is being exported to UAE is being majorly done via sea. We, alhamdulillah, were able to develop this technology, which was transferred to all the production houses in time, and now most of the exports, like 90% of the exports which happen for UAE, have been shifted to via sea trade instead of via air. So we have been trying to find out ways to still be competitive in the international markets. But for that, we need to focus on a few things that we need to control on our feed exports. Like similarly, if if a kind of grain is important for a proper growth of an animal, and that proper grain is exported out of Pakistan, like wheat has been banned to be exported from Pakistan as of now, as the information that I have. So if wheat is stopped, then its bhusa should also be stopped. Why is bhusa being exported? If wheat is stopped for our consumption, for our own growth and for our own consumption, then our animals need the leftover of that wheat also to be consumed. That bhusa should be stopped by the government also to be exported. Because if we start exporting that bhusa, and that bhusa prices are going to be risen within Pakistan, then obviously the raising of an animal and the cost related to it will also go up massively. And that is what Pakistan has seen in the past 6 to 8 months. So while we talk about having a focus on how we're going to export our meat, yes, FMD is one of the biggest problems. The government is focusing. We probably have crossed stage 2. We are towards stage 3. And the other thing is that we need to control exports on feeds of animals so that we are viable and people are actually getting into fattening, because unless and until a farmer is not going to be gaining anything, then there will be no focus from the farmer side to actually feed animals and make them grow or get into breeding of animals. So everything goes from the back chain, and we need to focus on everything. So I further explain, like there has been a rinderpest issue in 2002 within Pakistan, and that was Pakistan is rinderpest free. And in that time, Pakistan used to export a few of the beef offals. See, one is meat category. See, when a slaughterhouse is working, it's working on the entire animal. It's producing its meat, it's producing its offals, and both are worked upon, both are processed, and both are exported. So in 2002, because of this rinderpest problem, European Union actually, while they were not importing meat from us, but they were importing beef offals from us. Because of this rinderpest problem, European Union actually put a ban on Pakistan because of this rinderpest problem. This rinderpest problem was cleared off from Pakistan in 2007, 2008, but still that ban is still there from the European Union. The government needs to seriously look on that side, because while these certain kind of beef offals which are absolutely of no consumption within the local market, but were being processed and were being exported, the government should go back and see how many beef offals exports were there from Pakistan. Even they were of a few $1 million, we're wasting that exchequer as of the moment. That should be worked upon. The traceability issue, like Mr. Nazeer very well explained, because of this traceability issue, one is the FMD issue, the other one is the traceability issue. The traceability issue is one of the issues which hinder Pakistan from opening up other markets, because we do not have the data on the animals, pedigree and all. So because of that traceability, how does traceability come into the picture? Because of the one is foot and mouth disease, which the world is concerned about. The other one is the BSE disease, which is the mad cow disease, which the first world is concerned about. See, the better price pairs are the first world. If we're developing breeds, now we are focusing, like Sindh government is focusing on developing breeds. If we develop breeds and we develop that kind of meat which the first world wants to buy, how are we going to still export it to the first world? You understand what I'm talking about? We develop good breeds, we develop good quality meat, but if we do not have the access to the first world, how are we going to export it to them? So first we need to focus how to develop the access before developing breeds. That is one more important thing for export purposes, or for the local market. If you want to say you want to develop some kind of breeds, okay, fine. But for export purposes, unless until you have access to the first world, which comes to having these disease cleared from Pakistan, which is FMD, which is BSC traceability, like we have developed a farm. Now we can confirm that you can.
Faisal, you just went off.
Yeah, every animal animal is tagged, every animal is vaccinated. Like we on our own sources, we are vaccinating, which we have our own quarantine areas. We buy weekend animals, we bring them over there, we quarantine them, we actually provide them with FMD vaccinations, and then we include them into our main fattening herd. So everything starts from the basic levels. So like we have started on
If
with
I
our own finances. The government needs to come forward.
Faisal Sahib, if I may interject, I have the onerous task of being the timekeeper. So I would really request, I'm really grateful for your comments, but I would request if you could just summarize within the next minute or so we can kind of keep a track of time also.
So so we can go into a public-private partnership with the government, and we can actually develop this the back-end level in a way that we can develop what is being exported, what markets we can further export to, and this is how we can go forward.
I'm grateful. Thank you so much. So before going into, and those are very useful comments, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions coming in. So we'll be allowing around 20 minutes for the Q&A session. But before we go into the Q&A session, Nazeer Saab, you wanted to summarize your comments, so I can give you a minute or two if you could please summarize within a minute or two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So I was talking about the sector, that the sector development is dependent upon the investment. Public sector investment is very much meager, which needs to be, increased. Number two, financial institutes, they don't lend to the farm, the livestock sector, because they need a collateral, and collateral is a land. And what we know that 89% of the livestock farmers, they don't have a land, so therefore they don't access to the credit. The financial institutes. So we are also talking with the financial institutes and State Bank how they can make this, very much viable and tangible for the livestock farmers to access to the credit. And number three, that is a private investment, and private investment is not coming at that pace because of the one reason, that is the market price. The production cost is high, and the market price is low, and there is a price capping from the government side. The provincial government has several times communicated to the federal government at the highest level forum that there should be no price capping on the livestock products, including the poultry, and we are supporting this idea. In addition to this, coming to the comment from the Faisal, that no doubt there's a need to develop a breed, and there's a need to access to the first one, the world of the highest end market. The problem with this, the breed improvement task is far more than 30 years in the livestock, especially the bovine animals. So therefore, we are doing this in parallel. For access to the first world markets, there are certain things to do by the federal government, and the provincial government are with them. There were very precisely 3 things to do by the federal government in order to recognize our FMD control program. That was number 1, that there should be some of the highest level commitment from the federal level, what OIE has communicated, that there should be a highest political level commitment that you are going to do, FMD free Pakistan, like we did in Interpace. So therefore, all of the provinces has agreed, and this is topic for the CCI. And I think that has been placed in the CCI, that there should be commitment from the provincial and the federal government that will be approved. The second thing, there should be some FMD control program. The federal government has approved it, and CDWP is there, and then everything is in place. The third one, which was there should be some law or the act. The Punjab has already enacted Animal Health Act. We have done partly in the Sindh Livestock Registration Trade Authority, but I have been tasked to write, to draft a act for Balochistan, and we have a Pro-Vice Chancellor Rabbani Saab, who has been tasked for the drafting the Animal Health Act for the Sindh province. So we 2 people are working on that, and soon we will be developing, finalizing these draft acted and tabling into the Sindh Assembly as well as Balochistan for this. So therefore, access to the European and the West markets is also being in parallel catered. So therefore, the Sindh government thought that we should also work on the breed improvement. Though these are, I mean, very minimal, but we have started thinking on these lines and working on those lines. And only one comment on that, that when there the cost, I mean, I do agree that there should be no export of the fodder from Pakistan because it increases the input price and cost of production. But actually what we see that nobody was doing, I mean, from agriculture side, fodder growing until unless it was not paid high. So therefore, now the people are interested in fodder development and the fodder production because they have. So there's a thin line to see that where the interest lies and how the people they come to the fodder production. Thank God we have a silage making that has been industrialized and that has been, I mean, at the large scale. So wheat is also, I mean, banned, good thing, but the soybean import was a problem due to the corona. So therefore, they put on the pressure on the wheat and high in the increase for the cost of production for the poultry as well. So we need to think, I mean, in a larger scale that some people's interests are affected by the others. So the government sometimes thinks in that way. So therefore, some decisions are very tactfully to be taken and smartly taken. So therefore, I mean, sometimes if you put ban on the export of the fodder, then the people will lose developing and lose interest in developing fodder. So thank you very much for everybody. These were from my side. And if there will be any question and answer, I will respond.
Thank you, Nazeer Saab. Thank you. I think there's a lot of interesting topics that have come out. Particularly the one about the increase in the price of the animals. Obviously, that is something that will increase our cost of production. There's also, I mean, I do want to point out before we go into the Q&A, we have about 3 questions that have come into the chat box, and we have 1 hand raised. I think the one thing that we highlighted in the report was the sale by weight. In our country, the animal is sold on appearance, which is kind of a disincentive for the grower or the the cattle farmer to actually invest in fattening the animal. So I think that is also one element, if that might be of interest to anyone to comment on. So without further ado, we'd like to go into the Q&A. I'd like to request Mr. Yawad Ali Sahib, who is the chairman of Nestle Pakistan, to kindly make your question, sir. I'm allowing you to talk, please. Thank you, sir.
Oh, can you hear me now, Ji?
Ji, Yawad Sahib, you're loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's been a very good report, and it's brought out all the issues. I think one issue that we need to look at is the role of government versus the role of private sector. And in my view, the government should increase its budgetary allocation, also incentivize the entire value chain of beef production, which means from growing of beef till export of beef. And certainly it's the private-public partnerships. There are a number of government farms, and if they can be used for joint ventures for growing beef and exports, I think this could be one way of doing it. And in this case, I think we need to identify 2-3 good international players who we can encourage to come to Pakistan and ask them what they need to come to Pakistan. FMD certainly is an issue and needs to be done. Here, FMD also locally should be produced. I know one company, Feroz Sons Labs, who were doing a joint venture with the Argentinian company. And when they went to the government, they said, we need to have guarantee for purchase of FMD vaccine. So there was no guarantee, so there was no joint venture. Here, I think we could also come up with that. We have the IPP mode for producing electricity. I think a similar one could be do here. And now, one other thing I think is important, the government should withdraw from commercial sector. Sale of semen, sale of fodder, sale of seed. This is not the role of government. Government's role is disease control. They should be doing standards, regulation, monitoring. get State Bank to give special financial instruments for beef. Also research. And here I think the agriculture university should be involved in research. And finally, the ease of doing business. There are too many rules, too many things. So these have to be revisited so we can move further. Thank you very much, Saud.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rawsa, for the question, sir. And comment. Would any participant wish to respond to Yawar Saab's comment, please?
Yes, sir. If you kindly allow me. Regarding FMD investment, I already told that Sindh government is very much ready to receive public-private partnership, and some risk allocation will be there. And I think that the federal government has now communicated to the provinces that there will be some minimal budgets allocated for the FMD. So this will be somehow, but IPP model cannot be adopted exactly here, because the problem is that FMD is not only the product which is to be used in Pakistan only, but it has to be of international standard that can be exported to, region as well, and competitive at the competitive price. And Pakistan will be very much competitive on that. So Sindh government is very open, and we invite all of the investors to come with us and join hands with the Sindh government. The second thing, which was the sale of the semen and breed by the government. No doubt, we do agree that the government should not take part in the commercial activity, but government only does for only those people which are very much deprived, and they have their livestock as a livelihood, and they don't do the business, but they are providing these services of the breeding and vaccination at free of cost, because otherwise they will drop down the poverty line, and there will be the issue of the malnutrition so therefore, Yaqi Saab has rightly commented on. In addition to this, I can see that Mohammed Ibrahim is asking for the zones. In Sindh province, we have already notified 2 zones. One is Thapakar, and another is adjoining with the Punjab, that's a Ghotki area. And that's a desert area of in the Ghotki district. We have recently notified, and we have put allocations, budgetary allocations for FMD vaccination for Ghotki as well this year. Thank you very much. And the compartments from the government, livestock farms will not be a part of the commercial activity, as Yawar Saab has said, because they have their different tasks for the conservation of the breeds and breed improvement. So I think the government must thinking of, some leasing the land rather than partnering in the already allocated lands for the government, farms. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Nazeer Saab, for the response. Now I'm reverting to some of the written questions in the chat box, and we have one more hand, but I'll revert to the raised hand after the written questions. So the first question is about the presentation. Yes, the presentation will be shared and also will be published on PBC's website, so it will be available. Secondly, the question from an anonymous attendee is Pakistan does not have an effective inspection service. The National Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service was set up by EU assistance, but has kind of become ineffective, is what the question is saying. And then, it asks, it is extremely pertinent to revive NAFIS, which is the National Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and have the National Halal Certification Authority functional in the country. So this is the question. Can I ask Dr. Naeem Saab, would you have any response to this one?
Basically, the quality compliance and inspection that comes under the ambit of animal health commissioners. They can basically rely on how these quality inspections at central level work on for the inspections of the abattoirs and all allied meat byproduct industries.
All right. I hope that was that answered the question. So there is at the provincial level an inspection service as per Dr. Naeem Saab. The next question is, how many disease-free zones are in Pakistan or in Punjab particularly? Naeem Saab, over to you again.
Yeah, in Punjab, Bahawalpur division in Cholistan, we are proposing a disease-free zone.
So there's only one disease-free zone. And from what I understood from Nazeer Saab's intervention was there's one in Tharparkar. So one in Sindh and one in Punjab, so 2 in total. The other question is, any other important requirement for high-end market is global gap, but unfortunately in Pakistan, no livestock farm certified yet. I think Nazeer Saab has answered by saying that they are creating 5,000 compartments, which will be certified farms in effectively. Are there any compartments being created in Punjab also? Dr. Naeem Saab?
Yeah, in Punjab, 7 government farms were declared as a compartment.
So 7 farms. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So can I now move on to the next question for the person who wants to ask the question is Mr. Aurangzeb Jahangir. Aurangzeb Saab, I am opening your mic. Would you care to unmute also?
Aurangzeb
Saab, can you also introduce yourself, please?
Sorry. Yeah, this is TTAP. I am Abdul Karim from the Director General TTAP.
Okay, please go ahead.
ये जो हमारा FMD का इशू है, हमने 2 जोन्स भी बनाए हुए पंजाब में और सिंध में, तो इसकी रिपोर्ट्स क्या है कि हमारे ये जोन्स जो हैं इसमें ये डिजीज नहीं है, फुट एंड माउथ डिजीज। दूसरा मेरा क्वेश्चन ये कि हमने एक डेयरी वालों के साथ मीटिंग की थी कोई 6 महीने पहले, उसमें एक इशू उन्होंने आइडेंटिफाई किया था। उसमें इन्होंने इशू ये आइडेंटिफाई किया था कि हमारी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन बहुत ज्यादा है। कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ज्यादा होने की वजह से एक्सपोर्ट सरप्लस नहीं है। उन्होंने ये सजेस्ट किया था हमें कि जो है लाइव एनिमल्स की एक्सपोर्ट्स की इजाजत दे दें, ताकि जो है फार्मर्स को जो है ज्यादा पैसे मिले, और वो जब पैसे ज्यादा मिलेंगे तो एनिमल्स भी ज्यादा वो रेयर करेगा। तो इन दोनों क्वेश्चंस पे मुझे जो है पहले नजीर साहब से ये है कि हमारा थरपारकर का एक्सपीरियंस या पंजाब गवर्नमेंट का जो रिप्रेजेंटेटिव है FMD फ्री जोन्स का कैसा तजर्बा है। उसमें ये कि कोई भी ऐसा बंदा जो इस पे कमेंट करे। ये तो सही है कि हम जो है वैल्यू एडिशन की तरफ जाना चाहते हैं और हम कहते हैं कि लाइव एनिमल्स ना हो, लेकिन एक ये भी है कि अगर हम लाइव एनिमल्स की इजाजत दें तो फार्मर को ज्यादा पैसे मिलेंगे और वो ज्यादा एनिमल्स को रेयर करेगा। तो इन 2 क्वेश्चंस का जवाब मिले।
Sir, if you kindly allow me.
Nazeer Saab, you can go ahead, and then Naeem Saab also wanted to introduce.
Thank you. जो जोन है, जो ये पर्टिकुलर सवाल था कि उसमें FMD का क्या स्टेटस है, हम इशू ये है कि FMD फ्री होने के लिए जो है ना 6 और 7 स्टेजेस हैं, और जब आपको पता है कौन से वायरस सर्कुलेट कर रहे हैं, कुछ कहीं पे वैक्सीन कर रहे हैं तो लेवल 2 हो जाता है, लेकिन अगर आप बड़े लेवल पे वैक्सीन करते हैं तो लेवल 3 हो जाता है। हम व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू अचीव दैट्स अ लेवल 3। इन जोन्स में अभी भी FMD प्रीवेलिंग है, अभी भी इन्फेक्शंस रिपोर्ट होते हैं, लेकिन हम वैक्सीनेशन कर रहे हैं उनको और फोकस किया हुआ है। तो हम काफ़ी ऐसे ममालिक हैं, जिस तरह चाइना वो लेवल 3 में है, इंडिया क्यों चाइना को एक्सपोर्ट कर सकता है या जो है ना और एशियन कंट्रीज को, क्योंकि इंडिया ने अपने आप को रजिस्टर करा लिया और रिकॉग्नाइज करा लिया कि वो लेवल 3 में है, चाइना अभी लेवल 3 में है। तो अगर हम पाकिस्तान लेवल 3 में आ जाता है तो वी विल बी एट पार विद द चाइना एंड देयर विल बी नो इशू ऑफ एक्सपोर्टिंग मीट टू चाइना। तो ये जोन्स में डिजीज चलती रहती हैं, कहीं पे आउटब्रेक आते रहते हैं, फिर उस पर कारपेट वैक्सीनेशन होती है, लेकिन जब आप फ्री हो जाते हैं तो वो लेवल 6 और 7 आ जाती है, तब तक ये इश्यूज चलेंगे। जोन्स की एक और मैं ऐड करूं, पंजाब के जोन के साथ एक ये प्रॉब्लम थी कि पंजाब का एक तरफ तो इंडियन बॉर्डर था, दूसरी तरफ रिवर थी, और फिर सिंध की तरफ से ये कह रहे थे कि ये बॉर्डर है। तो हमने क्या, वो फिजिकल कोई सेपरेशन नहीं, तो सिंध से जो लाइव स्टॉक जाता था तो क्योंकि फ्रीक्वेंट मूवमेंट थी पंजाब और सिंध के बॉर्डर की तरफ, तो फिर फेडरल गवर्नमेंट में एक मीटिंग हुई प्लानिंग कमीशन में, तो फिर हमने ये जो है ना वो ज्वाइंटली एग्री किया कि सिंध ने कि हम थरपाकर तो करेंगे ही, लेकिन हम घोटकी को करेंगे ताकि बफर जोन बन जाए पंजाब के लिए, तो पंजाब का जोन वरना जो है ना, तो उस वजह से ये हुआ कि पंजाब के जोन में आउटब्रेक होते रहे हैं, क्योंकि सिंध से बहुत ज्यादा जानवर थे और घोटकी की तरफ से हमारा जोन डिक्लेयर नहीं था। अब हमने इस साल किया है, तो इस वजह से ये कि पंजाब का जो जोन है वो भी सिक्योर हो जाएगा और इंटरनेशनली वो एक्सेप्ट भी हो जाएगा, एक्रेडिटेड हो जाएगा। अगर सिंध ये नहीं करता तो शायद नहीं हो पाता, तो इस वजह से ये चीजें थी। बाकी ये जो बात थी कि भाई डायरेक्ट एनिमल एक्सपोर्ट, वो शायद फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का कोई नुमाइंदा हो तो वो करें। हम जो है ना सपोर्ट करेगा प्रोविंस कि अगर एनिमल एक्सपोर्ट किसी भी लेवल पे प्रोविंस को ऑन बोर्ड रख के की जाए तो उसमें फार्मर का ज्यादा फायदा होगा। और प्रोविंशियल लाइव स्टॉक डिपार्टमेंट हमेशा प्रो फार्मर्स होते हैं, हम प्रोडक्शन को सपोर्ट करते हैं। थैंक यू वेरी मच सर।
Dr. Naeem Saab, over to you, sir. डॉक्टर नीम साहब, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? जी
जी, बेसिकली डिजीज फ्री जोन के बारे में तो नज़ीर घोड़ा साहब ने बड़ा इसको कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली ब्रीफ कर दिया। मैं इसमें बात करूंगा कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन की। तो टी टैब की रिपोर्ट के मुताबिक जो $3 है इंडियन जो एक्सपोर्ट की जो है प्राइस पर केजी, और पाकिस्तान जो है वो राउंड अबाउट $4 में है। तो कम्पिटिटिवनेस के लिए पाकिस्तान इस कंपटीशन से आउट हो जाता है अगर वो अपनी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन को कंट्रोल नहीं करता। तो कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन को कंट्रोल करने के लिए सबसे बेहतर यही है कि हम अपने जो फीडिंग रिसोर्सेज हैं उनको मैनेज करें। एग्रीकल्चर के जो बाय प्रोडक्शन हैं, दीज आर द बेसिक कंपोनेंट्स विच आर बीइंग यूटिलाइज्ड इन द एनिमल फीड। तो एग्रीकल्चर और लाइफ स्टॉक वो दोनों को इसमें रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट चाहिए, यूनिवर्सिटीज के साथ कोलैबोरेशन चाहिए, और जो चीपर सोर्स ऑफ फीड है वो अवेलेबल हों विद हाई एफिशिएंसी। तो इस पे जो है वो डिफरेंट जो रिसर्च बोर्ड्स पंजाब गवर्नमेंट ने भी इस्टेब्लिश किए हैं, यूएस के साथ एग्रीकल्चर यूनिवर्सिटीज के साथ कोलैबोरेशन के साथ इस पे रिसर्च ट्रायल्स भी करते हैं। बादनगर फार्म पे हमारा एक बेसिकली फैटिंग सेंटर है जहाँ पे ये डिफरेंट रिसर्च करके हम उनको फील्ड में इम्प्लीमेंट करते हैं। और वी आर डूइंग के फार्मर्स की कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग हो इन टर्म्स ऑफ फीड फैटिंग। जी
Hassan sir, would you have any parting comments before we close the webinar?
Okay, so you know, I had a few observations. No matter which sector we look at, you know, we find certain commonalities when it comes to exports. So when we look at textiles, we find that, or we look at exports overall, we find that we rely on textiles for 60% of our exports. When we look at the market, you know, the markets to which we sell, we again find that in the you know, overall our total exports, 50% go to Europe and to North America. When we come back to meat, again we find a very high level of concentration. You know, we sell a lot of our meat to GCC, and then we also sell it in the format that is not necessarily growing at the same rate, which is frozen. So there's a huge parallels that exist, you know, in our total export profile. I think one other observation I have is, and that's something for the meat industry to take up, is that when we look at the 5 main core so-called zero-rated export sectors, we find that, you know, the at the bottom of that is carpets, and we export $80 million worth of carpets. But when it comes to meat, we are doing almost 250 million. Indeed, even in pharmaceuticals, we are doing about 250 million, and yet these you know, sectors are not accorded the same benefits that others are. So, for example, okay, energy maybe is not a major issue when it comes to livestock, although probably still does play a role, but certainly in pharmaceuticals it is. The Export Development Fund has got a huge amount of money that is accumulated. Who knows where that has gone? But even now, you know, further additions are going into the Export Development Fund. So I think there is a scope for that money to also to be deployed in particular, you know, in the two sectors that I mentioned, pharmaceuticals being one, but of course meat, you know, exports also being one of them. So we could develop new markets, we could develop new formats. I did not actually come across any mention from any of the participants on what are the constraints in getting into the frozen part of the exports. Is that something, you know, missing in the cold chain? We don't have enough freezing plants, or what is the constraint? But I'm sure there must be some constraints that limit us from doing that. I don't know if we have a minute. Maybe we can go back to Dr. Saab or to Nazeer Saab, and maybe they can address that, or indeed Faisal for that matter.
Bilkul, I think Faisal Saab, would you take a minute to quickly shed some light on this element?
There are a few facilities, including ours, which has the frozen facility. But we have been underperforming for the last 5 years just because the energy costs are too high. And because to make something frozen, you need to use blast freezing facilities to do that, and it's a 24-hour process. So it requires a lot of energy, and unfortunately, we are very expensive in energy. And because it's an unbroken process, then if there are load shedding, then you need to be on generators and stuff like that. So obviously, that we have not been able to, just because of these extra costs, haven't been able to crack different markets. And because it's a general understanding, because why we are in chilled, you just need to understand this, that these markets that we serve chilled product, which is a premium product, is very close to Pakistan. While this frozen product can be shipped from anywhere in the world, like Brazil can also export a 1-year shelf life product to the UAE. So if Brazilian prices are cheaper, so Pakistan cannot actually fetch a price more than the Brazilian price, even though we have the same quality. But obviously, because of higher cost of production and higher cost of the Pakistan, we haven't been able to crack that.
Right.
All right.
Okay. So one of the advantages of getting that zero-rated export sector classification would be the availability of energy at a cost which is broadly comparable, about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So I think that's something that we should incorporate in our recommendations to the government, as we go forward. Yeah. So I think I'll just close on that. I think there appears to be a lot of potential. I see that the government is also trying to do its best. There's a whole scope of public-private partnerships, and I think meat offers a huge prospect. I mean, we've got China, which is not a long way off. Brazil is able to serve China. Obviously, there's foot-and-mouth disease issues, etc., that we need to overcome. But I think there's a huge market lying just next door. So I think we need to continue to work on all the elements of the Make in Pakistan Trust with relevance to the meat industry.
Sansab, I thank you so much for your insights. And we've been making Khalil Sattar Saab, we've made him wait for the entire duration of the webinar for good reason. And the reason is because we would like to request Khalil Saab to bring it all together. Khalil Saab, you've listened to the entire conversation. Would you care to give your closing remarks? Thank you.
So first of all, let me comment on the very well-written report and presentation by Naeem, and you worked together on it. I think everything has been covered in this, but I'd just like to comment on certain things that were made. We've been hearing government is doing a lot of work. We've been hearing this from many, many years. They need to really focus and come forward. Halim Saab and Halim Saab is there. I'd like to, Nazeer Saab is there, Kalhoro Saab is there. These things must take off now. We have a policy, we've been trying FMD free zones since quite a long time, yet we have not come to stage 3. It's not very difficult to come to stage 3. Government needs to really focus on it and be determined on it. Our departments, they need to be really aggressive on control of FMD. They are working on it, but they need to be more aggressive. Now, there is a question of funds. Government needs to provide funds for it. If they want to do mass vaccination in an area. Cholistan, we worked a lot on Cholistan. I've done a lot of work on Cholistan. There is a complete report with the Government of Punjab, Livestock Department, on Cholistan. There's a lease policy. The government has to come up with a lease policy first, a land lease. Punjab government has livestock farms, 93,000 acres of livestock farm, where unfortunately livestock is not being really done there so much. It's more of an agriculture farm. Naeem, I'm sorry if I'm saying something which might not be appropriate to hear from a private sector. I think these farms need to be either leased out to private sector. There is a Cholistan. In Cholistan, there was a policy of lease grant policy for development of farm, and there was a lot of interest that can be taken forward. There were 100 farms that were designed there to be, given away to, leased out to investors. Cost of production is an issue. It's an issue because our breeds are not really meat producing breeds. So your feed conversion ratio is very poor. What we are doing is we are taking animals and trying to feed these animals more to gain weight. But these animals do not have a capacity to gain weight. They are mostly dairy milk producing breeds. They do not gain weight. So we need a breed, we need to develop a breed which can gain weight and convert feed at a lower cost into meat. The shortcut way is to do genetic intervention by insemination. We have one breed in our country already here, which can be further developed, is Lohani in Punjab. I'm sure Nazeer Saab must be aware of it. Naeem Saab must be aware of it. Lohani is there. It can be developed. It's a double muscle meat animal, and it can be developed in the country. It should, we should start working on it. I think I saw that breed in a livestock farm in Attak. It can be developed.
Yes, at Kharimurad.
The Kharimurad farm. So that can be, but we are not working on that breed. We should start working on that breed. It's a double muscle breed like the Belgian Blue. Now, Belgian Blue is considered to be one of the world's best converter of feed into meat. So we need to go on that. You see, competing in frozen market would be extremely difficult. It's not because of the electricity prices or because of lack of freezing plants. It is because of cost. The Brazilian and their costs are much lower because their agriculture productivity is very efficient. Their corn production yields are the best in the world. Their soya production is the best in the world. Unfortunately, we've made our raw materials expensive by levying very heavy import duties. Soya bean, we are trying to feed fatten animals on silage. We need to give them some additional proteins also, like, and some people are already doing, need soybean meal to give the animals to gain weight. If soybean meal is subject to import duties, soybean is subject to import duties, then the meals are subject to import duties, it becomes expensive. That is one way of reducing the cost. FMD vaccine, there was, as Mr. Yavarli mentioned, Rose company was joining hands with Mariel, first with Mariel, a French company. And they were almost ready, and the Mariels were ready to set up. The government of Punjab was ready to lease out the vaccine production center in Punjab. You have a vaccine production unit. They were prepared to give that. What Mariel wanted was that government of Punjab should definitely give them the market share. Instead of importing, they should buy from them. For some reason, the government changed, and the plan was thought that there was unfortunately, it was thrown out because it was done by the previous government, so it was not taken seriously. I think that needs to be taken up again. I'm sure if we invite some vaccine production producers, they would be more than willing to come here if we provide them some incentive. So the cost of production can come down. There are already some semen production units here in Punjab, but they need to import proper bulls to produce semen locally. Mr. Faisal suggested banning feeds, raw materials. I think these are conflicting views because the government is interested, of course, in foreign exchange. The need is to improve our yields. That is the key. I mean, our yields have to be improved. We are an agro-based country. If we cannot improve our yields, our productions cannot be competitive. Not only of meat, but also of cotton, for instance. The yields have to go up. So we need to work more on yields. The government has to work more on yield production yields. Kalhoro Sahib has also mentioned about setting up free zones in Sindh. I don't know what stage we are at there. We are still not at stage 3. I don't know if we are at stage 2. And how do we verify how has that been done? Has traceability been done there? There was a project made by the federal government for traceability. They had started that, and I think we have not touched Balochistan. Balochistan is probably the most region where there is the greatest potential in Balochistan. They have some good breeds which can be developed into meat breeds. They have vast land. They have vast lands, and these lands they are also prepared to lease out land, but they need to make a lease policy there. They were thinking of developing organic meat production there because animals are grazing there. They're not being fed. Feedlots nahi hai wahan pe. They're doing grazing. So I think we need to look at Balochistan as a potential producer of meat. And KP also has a great potential. As far as export of live animals is concerned, that is already banned by the government. It was banned in 1996. So obviously, live animals should not be exported. There is a modern unit, value addition unit in Punjab at Thokar Nyas Bay. It was supposed to produce value-added products, but I don't think it is doing that now. It's probably doing the same work. People are bringing their animals and getting them slaughtered there. So they can, Naeem Saab, if you can.
Khalil Saab, if I can just jump in with a time check. I think we can close in the next couple of minutes. So if you would care to, summarize your remarks, and then we can go ahead and close the session whenever convenient for you. Thank you.
My remarks are already summarized. I think I've done enough. I would just suggest that we really need to get on with things. Instead of, I'm addressing the government departments at the moment. We really need to get on with things. It's been, I've been hearing this FMD control since more than 15 years now. So it's high time. If we are serious in exporting meat, there is a potential, but I mean, we can't compete with India because you see they have surplus. They don't consume meat, so they want to export anything, buffalo meat. So it's difficult to compete with them, but we have to focus on reducing cost of production by improving breed, by improving feed. One thing that has not been touched is the present markets that are there. They're in horrible condition. You don't get water there. The animals don't get water there. There is no place to, because they come overnight and they are there. They need water. Has has to be some accommodation for the livestock for farmers who come there to sell their products. These things are absent. And it's already been touched that animals should be sold by weight and not by number. That's the most important thing because it defeats the purpose of, improving the weight. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khalil Saab. Again, thank you, everyone. Nazeer Saab, unfortunately, we don't have time for more comments. So I would like to thank our panelists, especially Nazeer Saab, Dr. Naeem Saab, Khalil Saab, Faisal Saab, Yawar Saab. Thank you so much for the questions. And I would like to wish everyone a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.